Hello people in the room. Hello people online. My name's Char Bailey. I use she and her pronouns. I am Director of People and Culture at Birmingham Pride. You might have seen me writing features and doing some roving reporting for Diva magazine. I also work on education and wellbeing for UK Black Pride. And as an out, proud, autistic ADHDer, I also sit on the board for an organisation called Neurodiversity in Business. I'm thrilled to be here to speak to you all with my lovely panellists about psychological safety. But I think it's really important that if we're going to delve into a topic where we ask people to be vulnerable, to have candour, and to disarm themselves, that we in the room and you people at home also do that. So first of all, for anybody who's watching online or in the room who needs an audio-visual description of me, I am a mixed-race woman of colour. I have just longer than shoulder-length curly hair. I'm wearing a blue jacket and a white shirt. I'd like to invite you at home and in the room to just allow yourself to land in this space. So if you need to roll your shoulders back, yawn, stretch, wiggle around in your seat, and just arrive here so that we can be psychologically safe in this room and have a really gorgeous, explorative, and educational conversation. Are we ready in the room? And I hope we're ready online. So I'm not going to take up too much space. I want to allow my incredible panellists to introduce themselves. So if you tell me your name, your pronouns, and a little bit about who you are and where you come from. And I'm going to start with the lovely Ella. Hello, Ella.
Hi. Hi, everyone. My name's Ella Slade. My pronouns are they, them. I am trans, queer, non-binary. I work at Vodafone in their diversity inclusion team as specifically the LGBT+ lead. So that's a little bit about me.
Hello everyone, I am Kit Morey. I am they, them pronouns. I'm also trans, queer, non-binary. And I work at Paramount broadcaster. And I'm very thrilled to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura Wilkinson. I use she and her pronouns. As of last week, I'm the Managing Director of LGBT Foundation. Which is
as of last week, congratulations.
For audio, I am a 6 foot tall, blonde, wearing all black. LGBT Foundation is a national health and wellbeing charity. We provide services for queer communities spreading queer hope and joy. We are national, but we're based in Manchester. We run many life-changing and life-saving services and work with about 40,000 service users per year, as well as doing kind of policy and change influence. Our most probably flagship programme is our helpline, which is 50 years old next year. And yeah, we'll hear more about that probably throughout. Over to you.
I'm Catherine, so she, her. I'm the Strategic Workforce Director at BT Consumer, so that's anything BT, EE, PlusNet in the UK. Within that, I look after kind of the consumer operating model, HR analytics, all stuff people-based, basically. So that's a little bit of me.
Brilliant. Can I have a round of applause for my excellent panellists, please? I think it would be remiss for me to talk about psychological safety without just acknowledging the fact that I'm a woman of colour. I'm a queer woman of colour. I'm a queer neurodivergent woman of colour. And so there's an extra layer when it comes to psychological safety for people who are in bodies like mine. And I think if we're going to talk about inclusion, diversity, intersectionality and equity, we need to all first be aware that people are different, we come in different bodies, we have different experiences, and that can really shape the way that the world looks at us and the way we look at the world. So today, as I invite you all, along with my panellists, to be open, I'd ask you to apply that intersectional lens and to just notice perhaps what you haven't noticed before, listen perhaps to someone that you haven't listened to before, and listen with the intention of understanding. A lot of the times we listen to reply and we wait in conversation for our turn to say what we want to say. And so in this space, I invite you and encourage you gently to really hear from our panellists today. Psychological safety is something that I'm really privileged to have. I work for Diva magazine. I work for the king of the lesbians. It's really easy for me to speak up. It's really easy for me to raise my concerns. And if you ask, our editor-in-chief, Roxy Bordelon, I'm really good at disagreeing because I'm psychologically safe to do so. I'm allowed to give my opinion. I'm allowed to feel safe to do that. And that allows me to thrive. Another point that I want to just quickly make before we start some storytelling is that I want you to get rid of the idea that we need to have psychological safety because it's good for our business case and it helps people become productive and better at their jobs. Because whilst this is a workplace conference and that's important, I want you to aim for psychological safety just because you genuinely care about the well-being of the people within your organisation. You genuinely want them to show up as themselves, and that comes from a place of acceptance and inclusion rather than performance and maximisation. Can we agree to that? Excellent. We're on for a winner, guys. I'm going to start with you, Kit, actually, because a lot of the time we get asked, why do we have these events? Why do we have these lesbian visibility weeks? You can have kids, you can get married. Why are you still talking about this? And you talked to me a little bit about your journey, and it was a real eye-opener, and it really emphasised that message of why spaces like this are important. So I'll start with you, please.
No pressure.
No pressure, you've got it.
Well, first, I'd like to say happy birthday to Diva, 30 years. 30 years ago, I came out this week, actually.
Yay.
30 years ago this week. I don't think it was a huge shock for anybody that knew me, although my mother was quite shocked. But I can remember going and buying Diva magazine quite furtively, in shops or finding it in bars, and it was like a lifeline. So when we talk about why this matters, thank God people like Linda Riley and the other people that work with Linda and Diva do a week like this, because we do need to be visible. Over the last 30 years, I haven't been as visible or made as much noise as I think I ought to have done. I started off making an awful lot of noise when I came out at uni and became president of the Gay Soc. That's what we called it then. And suddenly realised I was in a space where I could be me. I then went into the workforce, which was the world of television, which has been a wonderfully accepting industry. I have been a freelance television director, producer, exec producer for 22 years, and as such have constantly moved from company to company to company. And I think one of the speakers from earlier said, you work super hard because you feel you've got to be excuse me, better than the next person, because you've just got to keep being brilliant because you feel close to almost being found out, or you've got a sort of fraud complex, and I just think, when you're a freelancer and when you identify as being a lesbian and also neurodiverse, ADHD, autistic, I just constantly felt like I couldn't believe I had a job, and I was so very grateful to have that job. And it wasn't until 5 years ago this month, that I got a job at Paramount, and it was my first forever job. It was the first time I was PAYE. It was the first time there wasn't an end date on a contract, which was completely new to me. It's the first time I was paying ginormous amounts of tax as a PAYE, and there was an inclusion week held at Paramount, and I didn't know what an inclusion week was. I walked into work, there were balloons everywhere, there was posters, the floor was different. It was like, is this for me? And this whole week was organised by Paramount, and they had speakers in, and I know, Linda and the gang have sort of done, come in and spoken before, and it was leaders in the world of LGBTQ+ projects, people that had got personal experiences. There was trans, non-binary representation, it was like a candy shop of brilliant, bright, proud, intelligent, inspirational, wonderful people from our community coming in to speak. And I went downstairs for the trans non-binary talk. It was Fox Fisher came in, and I listened, and everything made sense. And 30 years ago, I came out as a lesbian, and 5 years ago, I realised actually that the non-binary is what suits me. This is what I am. And I listened, and I went back up, and I sat at my desk, and I felt, I could feel every cell in my body ignited with terror, but also with hope that I'd found this thing that I knew spoke to me. Quite quickly, I heard some voices behind me, which were colleagues that hadn't quite, that through no fault of their own, were struggling with the concept of a they-them concept. There were some comments that weren't too accepting. There was a little bit of laughter. And I sat at my computer screen and I burst into tears. Those sort of tears that you can't stop coming down your face. And I thought, that isn't going to change unless I change, unless I stand up and be visual and say, this is who I am. I want to work here. This is where my home is now, with my long contract. But I have to make a change, make a difference. So I went home that night, spoke to my wife, spoke to my parents, came in the next day, spoke to my boss, who was thrilled, because Channel 4 don't have a non-binary commissioner, and Channel 5 do. And the rest of that day was spent trying to sort out my email and admin. And I felt like, I've never felt better since that day 5 years ago. But but with that, I think comes with me being able to feel safe in my workplace. You cannot help, if you feel safe in your workplace, it then instantly makes you ask the question, do other people feel safe in this workspace and in their own workspaces? I am so privileged to rock up at a company every single day, completely me. Completely me. So I feel like I have work to do, and I want to be involved with others who are working tirelessly so that every single human being, whatever their thing is, feels safe to come to work. And it is paramount that you feel safe.
I love what you did there.
And, it is a work in progress. If I have one more conversation with people, go, how about you put those pronouns on your emails? Because I think that would just be a really great inclusive thing. And you do get there, but that's not really for me because I'm just a normal heterosexual person. It doesn't affect me. And then I have the conversation, and I have it quite often. And that's okay, because I can keep having the conversation, because it is a conversation, and I just hope that gradually things, evolve, and that's why Linda and the gang are coming in on Thursday to speak about how important visibility is. So yeah, that's just a little bit about my second coming out 5 years ago.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because often when we hear our peers disagreeing with our existence, we shrink. We cry, as you cried, but the response for most people is to make themselves smaller, not to turn and face it head on and say, well, actually, you're talking about me and my people, and I'm going to own this so that those who come after me don't have to. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for sharing that story, because I think a lot of people will resonate with what it feels like to hear those whispers. And that's it, isn't it? That's one of the things that adds to this psychological unsafety that we have at work, those whispers. I'm going to come to you next, Ella, and sticking on the theme of what makes it unsafe. I know you've been on a journey with your sexuality and your gender expression, so can you tell me a little bit about that journey and just focus more on what makes the workplace unsafe for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a former lesbian, is how I'd kind of put it. I identified as a lesbian when I first entered the workforce. So I work at Vodafone now. I have done since July. But prior to that, I was at IBM for 9 years. So the entire rest of my career. I started there when I was 20. I actually came out in my interview at IBM for my internship job there. And I was chatting to what would become my manager. And I just was referencing some of the work that I'd done at university as part of my network. And she was very, from the second I met her, she gave off this really warm, friendly vibe. So I felt safe, and I felt like, even though I also got straight white woman vibe, I still felt, I still felt that she seemed like a really nice person. So I felt safe in that interview, saying that this is some of my experience through being part of the LGBT plus network at university. Then, when I was then in my internship, I was 20 and made the decision straight away. I was like, right, I need to come out like quick, because otherwise I don't want this to be a thing that is dragging, that I'm thinking about. Bear in mind, I already had incredibly short hair at that point, already dressed very androgynously. I don't think it was a surprise to anybody. But I also was single at the time, and I think that we often overlook the fact that if you are not in a relationship, it's harder to come out because you have to kind of force the conversation. So I randomly started referencing my ex-girlfriend just so that I could bring it up in the conversation.
In true lesbian fashion.
I was like, my ex-girlfriend did this. I did actually have an ex-girlfriend, and yes, she's one of my best friends. Was one of the, like,
I knew it.
Yeah, was at my wedding, all that thing, and I was at hers. So, but yeah, so I think I wanted something to make sure that I was able to get that out the way. And I'm really glad I did, and I appreciate that I'm a very confident person, and I think I very much, from a very young age, have this strong sense of who I am and feel able to talk about that and able to communicate that. And I think that only really helped me in those kind of early years in my internship, as I then came out as queer a few years later. My relationship status was changing, and I was dating a guy, and in addition to dating other people as well. So I think being able to have that transparency, I think, partly came from myself and my own confidence. But I think having a team at the time, and I work in HR, and I did work in HR then as well, but having a team where everybody showed genuine interest in one another, I think was so key, because people just wanted to know how I was. And that was such a lovely environment, so I felt like I could share, actually, I have this thing going on with this partner, I have this going on with this person, and that really helped. I then, in my career, made the move into the D&I world and became a professional queer, which was wonderful. So I used to work in like employer branding and talent marketing, but I was always like, oh, how can we attract diverse talent? What more can we do? But then I was like, I don't want to just attract them. I want to make sure they have a great time when they're here. And Char, like your point on the intro about let's not just create this psychological safety because it's good for business. Let's do it because it's the right thing. I think working in the D&I space, I get so annoyed when we only focus on D&I is good for business, it's good for productivity, it's good for profitability. It's the right thing to do.
Could you just write me a business case?
I will. Like, why is that not enough? Like, why are we at this point in society where doing the right thing is not enough? So that was a side note I didn't intend to go down. But yeah, so I moved into the D&I team, and it was wonderful. I was in a global team. I was IBM's global LGBTQ plus lead. I did that role for 4 years. I met some phenomenal people from around the world, mainly virtual because it was COVID time, so I didn't actually get to travel as much as I hoped. But I met some amazing people, and through that, Kit, I was totally relating to your bit around it actually being a moment at work that helped you realise your own identity. So I was in this amazing, we used Slack as our communication tool, and we had a space specifically for non-binary people. And I was in there because it was my job to like oversee all the stuff that was happening at work. And somebody started talking in there about the like concept of gender euphoria. And I'd only ever before then really heard about gender dysphoria and about the challenges that trans people face and about the negative side and the struggles that people go through and the battles that they face. And I think I'm also like one of my exes actually described me as being like painfully optimistic.
Was it the best friend ex?
It's not that one, it's a different one. But described me as being painfully optimistic. Like I always see the good in things and all that kind of stuff, and always look on the bright side. So I think because I'd only associated the kind of negative experiences with being trans and with being non-binary, I hadn't really opened my mind to actually the possibility of tapping into those positive things. And I had experienced so much gender euphoria in various different kind of parts of my life, or different outfits I've worn, or different things that I'd done. So I just really leaned into that, and I was like, I want to learn more about that. And through conversations with IBM employees and members of the trans and non-binary community, I was like, this is it. Like, these are my people. This is where I belong. I still, to this day, have not met any of those people face to face. That was a solely virtual interaction, and I reached a point where I'd been at IBM 9 years. I didn't want to end up being there 30 years, and I could see myself getting very comfortable. So I made the decision to move on and to move on to Vodafone. But I think a workplace creating an environment where people can have those conversations is so key. I then moved to Vodafone, and my first day, my manager, like my pronouns were all over my LinkedIn and all over my CV and everything. And my first day, my manager sat me down, and well, I joined the office, and reception was sorting my badge and referred to me as she, her. And I was like, you know, it happens. People that use them pronouns know it happens all the time. And then I had my first meeting with my manager, and he was like, I want to make sure that you feel seen and you feel supported here. With regards to your gender and with regards to your pronouns, how would you like me to handle situations like what happened earlier with security? Would you like me to interrupt straight away and correct them there and then? Or would you like me to follow up and have a conversation with them afterwards? Would you like to handle that? I honestly was floored. I'd never been asked that. I'd never been given that kind of power and autonomy to say, actually, this is how I'd like to handle this situation. And honestly, I'd never really thought about it that much either. So that was amazing. And I was like, yeah, if it happens again, if I don't say anything, yeah, say something, interrupt them, that's fine. So yeah, it was a really kind of powerful experience that set me up, I guess, for success in that role at Vodafone. So I've only been there since July, and it's been really wonderful that has been something that I think was a really great first indicator, really made me feel welcome from day one. So I think a lot of the stuff about psychological safety is we have to be proactive about setting up that environment, and be very careful that if that was glossed over and if it was never mentioned, if there was that kind of elephant in the room of yes, I am trans and yes, I am non-binary and we're just not going to talk about it, I think I wouldn't have felt psychologically safe, because I felt like there's part of myself that is not being addressed here. Whereas having a kind of proactive, direct approach really helped me. I feel like I've spoken for too long, so I will stop now. But yeah,
no, we're all hanging on your every word, and I'm just after this, I'm definitely going to be following you on socials, finding out who your exes are, making friends with them myself, because we are lesbians, and this is what we do. But thank you so much for sharing, and specifically talking about that one person who asked you those questions. When we talk about psychological safety, I think there's this word that has to go along with it, and it's curiosity. We have to become really curious about each other, and curious with an aim to help. It's really easy to look at someone who's different from you and to make up lots of different stories about who they are, what they do, and what their life's like based on your conscious or unconscious biases. So if we're talking about acceptance and safety, then we have to think about curiosity and having curiousness in a gentle way. That person that made a difference to you, I've met lots of those people. Linda's one of those people, Kat's one of those people, Sally's one of those people. There's people in the room who I can say, in moments throughout my career, I've seen them or engaged with them and they've made a difference. I'm going to come to you, Catherine, and let's be warm, because I know that Catherine and Nora, they're not panelisters. They're working queer women who are showing up, and they don't talk to groups very often, so let's be extra gentle. But something you said, which was so powerful, because I'd like to connect with people, and we connected before this panel, but it was that, I've written it down, it takes one person to make you feel included, But on the flip side of the coin, it just takes one person to make you feel excluded. Can you speak more a little bit about that and the cost of not showing up? Because, you know, you've found all your courage and you've shown up today. So what does that mean?
Absolutely. So it's interesting that we're reflecting on kind of moments that matter. And to be transparent, I've had a bumpy ride. So I've been very fortunate to work for some excellent brands who have excellent external marketing about how fabulous they are and how inclusive they are.
Are they a family?
They may in fact be a family. I will not name them, but you all have access to my LinkedIn. But I've been very fortunate to be able to work there, but there have been moments that mattered to me where I have felt excluded. Moments where it's less so about what happened, it was the response of those around me and how they didn't step in and didn't help. And, you know, particularly for me, I'm quite reserved, quite quiet. This is big for me. So
You're smashing it.
imagine me in a work environment where, you know, I don't really take the stage. So when, you know, something happens, maybe you've been messaged inappropriate things on internal Slack or Messenger, and you've taken that to your manager and said, wow, this has gone beyond my boundaries. Like, this is a big thing for me to have stepped in. And then your manager says, yes, but you didn't say anything, or you didn't do this. And then you sit there going, oh, crikey. So we will happily broadcast. But in those moments that matters, one person made me feel massively excluded. So I bounced out of that organisation, off I went somewhere else with that scar. So I would describe it as carrying that with me, and it then modified my behaviour going into another organisation. So again, think reserved, but then on steroids. So I'm protecting my well-being by being as kind of under the radar as possible. But there was a moment where my partner at the time, I was actually overseas working. My partner at the time was in hospital with sepsis. She's fine, it's fine. We're good, she's now my wife, so it's fine. But, and I had not told anyone. And I sat there going, oh shit. So apologies. I'm now in another country, on the other side of the world, dealing with this, trying to organise care and everything, and who's going to look after the cat, all of that stuff. And sat there going, I have a choice in this moment that matters. Do I talk to the people around me? Do I tell them of this actually something everybody can empathise with, everybody can understand that kind of moment where someone that you care about is very ill? Do I step in and do I tell someone? So I did. But my experience was very corporate, very, we'll support you, do you need to fly back? And that was the last conversation I had with them. So no one asked me how they were, no one followed up with me, nothing happened after that. And I went, hold on, have I missed something? They had not realised how much of a moment it was for me to share, obviously, because I'd internalised that and I'd created that for myself. But the fact that it was a moment, yes, they did the kind of safeguarding, we'll get you home, you can do that. What about the follow-up? What about the inclusivity? What about the community? What about the culture that you want to, just from a human being aspect, doesn't really, never mind it's a woman, but all of that. So again, bounced out of that organisation. Was very fortunate to work for a very vocal brand about their LGBT plus support. And another moment that mattered, and another that let me down. So it was actually the head of inclusion at the time that pulled me into a room when I just started. I was super excited. So because of these scars that I'd taken with me, I was really, really specific about who I would work for. So I'd done my research, I looked for it, and I'd gone to this organisation thinking, I'm going to work somewhere that this is never going to happen to me again. I'm going to feel the full might and support of the organisation behind me. Pulled me into a room about a week in a very private room separately. And anyway, the conversation was very intrusive and really went over my boundaries. So I walked out of that room going, here we go again. So a lot of resonating with a lot of kind of what was talked about earlier about feeling very lonely, feeling really exposed, feeling, again, back in my box. I tried to go to an environment where I thought, you know, out there I would be able to do what I needed to do. And then that moment, I know from a brand ethos that's not what they stand for, but then in the moment it hadn't permeated through to every conversation, to the understanding And also for them to be, seeing me and learning continuously. This is not something that stays static. You have to seek learning. You have to come to events like this, hear from different people to understand what goes next. I luckily now work for an organisation where I feel massively supported, and probably why I'm sat on this stage, because I found it. It's so important, but I want to then amplify it.
Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you for showing up. And I think one of the important things that we can all relate to, that Catherine beautifully shared, was that those moments leave scars. When you don't feel protected in your work environment, it leaves you lonely, as you said, unexposed. And those, as you said, those moments matter. So I want you to think about the decision that you make when you interact with individuals. Are you a protective person? Are you leaving scars or preventing scars? Are you going to be a person like Ella's former boss who said, how do you want me to deal with that? Because one of the things that specifically lesbians are really good at, and it's documented throughout history, but lesbians are great at being allies. We're great for standing up for the underdog and joining forces and fighting and sticking up for. So I think if you are a lesbian, let's keep doing that. And if not, let's look to do that for each other. I'm going to come on to you now, Laura. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
She's ready. She's 6 foot northern blonde. And she's newly MD, so congratulations. And I think that's what I want to talk about with you, because what's different about your experience or your role now is that you actually work for an LGBTQIA plus organisation. So we would hope and pray that within an organisation like that, you are getting an idea of what good looks like. So before we jump to how incredible it is where you are now, and the incredible things that you're doing and how we can implement some of those things ourselves, tell us a little bit about how you got there. And most specifically, tell me a little bit about, I wrote this down. There was a time in my life where I thought that you couldn't be black and a lesbian. I thought that it wasn't a thing, until I saw Lady Phil. And I was like, oh gosh, thank goodness. There have been so many women in my life, like Linda, who have shown up and been their whole selves and have made me go, oh, flipping now, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm all right. I'm actually allowed to just be this version of me, and I don't have to shrink or femme up or mask or do anything differently. I can just exist. So talk to me about that. I saw a real-life lesbian at work. That's what you said.
So I saw a real-life lesbian at work. I guess what I want to talk about is when you reflect on your queer journey, your queer roadmap. For me, it started, being very young, and I think when you look back, you're like, oh, okay, so when Tattoo, All the Things She Said came out, why did I like that music video so much?
Did you run up against the fence at school in your shirt in the rain trying to reenact it, or was that just
the
me?
disappointment of finding out they weren't queer people in the music video still haunts me today.
I didn't even know that, and now it's going to haunt me too.
Seeing the first Pride badge on someone's bag as a teenager in town, while I was probably, running around with my rucksack on, and following them a little bit and being like, wow, where are they going? I've never seen this visibility before. And I think something I've reflected on is that you don't know what you need until you've got it, right? Mm-hmm. So by doing this panel today, I thought, it's going to be this one-off event. But actually, I've already gained so much before even having the privilege to sit with you today. And it's been my own reflections, I guess, and my own journey, and thinking, well, actually, I have felt psychologically safe at work before, but I don't necessarily think within my queer self until I worked at LGBT Foundation. And it's everything really, including the nuances of people understanding your community, so you can make that joke like you did earlier about a lesbian ex being your best friend. And
not mine.
Those elements of that. But so, I finished uni, went travelling quite a bit, experienced some really unpsychologically safe workplaces, particularly while working in regional Australia. I worked on an almond farm driving a tractor.
That's a lesbian dream though, isn't it? Did you have a flannel shirt and everything?
But yeah, the workplace wasn't in that sense. So, someone who I knew, my queer friend, worked there before me and gave me a heads up and said, don't be out at work And I was like, what? It was like the day before I started there. And it was very, very good advice, actually, because the things that I witnessed wouldn't have been safe for me. And then you realise you're really far away from home and you don't have that network of people around you, and how would that feel? So yeah, you know, I was mid-20s and I was back in the closet. So then coming back, working in charities, you know, in England and in different community organisations, feeling like, yeah, I can bring my whole self to work, working for a family, and then reflecting on actually how that language can be quite damaging if it's not reflected in the workplace. And something that I feel quite strongly about is that a workplace should be really honest externally about what they offer and what they don't offer. Because if we're saying bring your whole self to work, but that's conditional, bring your whole self but not that bit, we're then inviting people in spaces that aren't necessarily safe, and the damage and the scars that can leave can, you know, last a lifetime. So when I went to my interview at LGBT Foundation, met this incredible woman called Jax, who was on the panel. She's our chair of trustees. She's been, you know, youth worker to a massive advocate, and she's speaking at the Westminster event tonight. So if any of you are there, say hi. So Jax has had a really profound impact on me, professionally and personally, and we've become close friends. But when I met her, I went to dinner with my friends a few weeks later, being in the role, and someone said to me, you know, how's work been? And I was just talking about this brilliant woman that I've met and how inspirational she was. And I felt quite emotional when I was talking. I thought, this has really got a lump in my throat. Why is that? And I realised at, you know, the age of, you know, 30 odd, that I'd just met the first person in real life that I thought, God, I want to be like you. You know, like Claire Bolden and Sue Perkins, brilliant. And there were so many, like, gay men on TV when I was growing up and, you know, going to school under Section 28 and my music teacher telling me in secret that she was gay but not to tell anyone, and the hangover from that. So yeah, and it leads you to think, well, how can I be Jax to someone else? How can I be that role model? And that's what Lesbian Visibility Week is all about, right? And we're all here doing that. So yeah, working at LGBT Foundation, it is a very inclusive organisation. We do like to practice what we preach as well. And I'm not going to say that everything, you know, we get everything right, because obviously we don't. We're a learning organisation. We're currently trying to do more work around binding in the workplace, what that can feel like, about actually a working day from 9 till 5 isn't safe for people that bind. It can cause real physical damage, and how we can create workarounds for that and it be reflected in policy. And we also run training programs for other workplaces to share our learnings as well. But yeah, I've already learnt so much from listening to you, so I just wanted to say thanks as well for sharing.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. And even just that fact about binding being unsafe, just around the room, put your hand up if you knew that. For those online, we've got about 4 people in the room. And so just that itself is really important, not just for our well-being, but for our physical health as well. Yeah. Kit, I want to ask you something, and then I'm going to ask everybody else on the panel to answer the same question. But we had a really fun chat, and you were really animated about just one tiny thing being changed at work, and it would just make you feel so much better. Can you tell us a little bit about just what that tiny thing was, and then we're going to ask everybody else what's just one small thing that we can change? It might make a big difference.
Yeah, I really wanted to get a little sign on there. So I use the disabled toilet. I hope that's the right phrase.
Accessible toilet.
Accessible toilet, yes, at work, which is absolutely fine. And it sort of sits in between the male and female toilet at work. And sometimes, because lots of other people go in there, it's busy. So I sort of like stand outside because I feel like, no, this is my space and I want to be able to use it. And I really wanted a little sign that was just that sort of male-female, the gender-neutral sign. It's visible. You know, it's just, it's not a big thing, but it's getting, you know, it's a big thing for me because I think if there was just that sign, there's one at Victoria Station, and every time I get to the toilet at the station, I'm like, yes, because you're saying people like you are here and welcome, come and have a wee, you know, that's what's happening. But downstairs, there's another accessible toilet, and it's got a baby changing sign on it. And we aren't allowed babies in our office. You're not allowed under 18s in the office. So I feel like, you know...
Who's changing these babies?
Where are these babies?
Sneaking these babies in.
And it is important that parents with babies that need changing do have a space. I'm not trying to take that away. But I'd love to also put the other sign up above. And I've thought about maybe buying one on Amazon and putting it on there.
We will start a petition.
But there are, I would like to say, there are toilets that are absolutely, you know, cubicles that anybody could use and everything. It's just, I think visibility, badges, you know, I have one on my, you talked about this, on the backpack, you know, I've got one, my pronouns are they, them. I am that old, you probably did. But it's being visible, you know, it's being, I mean, God, my first Pride, I got a pink triangle shaved into the back of my head, you know, and it's, and people say, oh, you don't need to wear a badge. It's like, well, maybe you do. Maybe you do need to wear a badge, because when I see somebody who's got a badge that says they, them, I feel seen, me. And so I am a advocate of a badge, so yeah.
Get a badge, everyone.
Get a badge.
Important stuff. But I think
and a hat. Look at that hat.
Founder of Lesbian, that hat normally actually says lesbian power.
I should say queen of lesbians.
I had a similar thing actually recently. I was on a run, and I'll touch on the workplace thing in a minute, but I was on a run, and everything had been happening with the cast review and everything coming out, so it was a pretty rough week, I'd say, for trans people. And I was on a run, and I just paused halfway and taking a little selfie, as I do. And a couple, presumably a straight couple, just to make a big assumption, were walking their dog and just walked past me. And the woman was wearing a T-shirt from Not a Phase, and it said on the back, like, support trans lives. I nearly cried, like, mid-run. I was like, it's just, it is powerful to see, like, little things like this, like, out in the wild. You have no idea the impact that has, those little things. And then to touch on your actual question about the workplace, I'd say, and this isn't really one thing because I think it's pretty big, people having an awareness of what's happening in the world for LGBTQ plus people and bringing that into the workplace and having that conversation to check in. I think that's so critical given where we are at right now with LGBTQ plus rights, and specifically for the trans community. I think knowing what's happening, and again, the same manager that checked in with me on day one about the pronouns thing, he repeatedly, and I've only been at Vodafone since July, but he has repeatedly reached out when something has hit the news that has impacted the trans and non-binary community and said, I know this is rough. If you want to take the afternoon off, I would completely understand. If you want to have a chat about it, let's chat. And that's been so useful. And I think that's something that I also do in my role, looking after the LGBTQ plus community. I feel sometimes too much, but in immense, this is going to sound negative now, but pressure and responsibility to make sure that they are all okay, and to make sure that I'm recognising you're probably having a really shit week, you're probably having a rough day. Like, this is going to impact you in the workplace. And particularly back when I was at IBM, a lot of our employees were in the US. Obviously, there was just an onslaught of anti-LGBTQ plus bills and things coming forward and instances happening. We've had deaths, obviously, within the community. And holding that space, and I think what I've tried to do is implement some of these, we called them like safe space conversations, but kind of a similar format to today, creating a space where people do feel able to share. There's not been an agenda, there's not been a list of speakers, it's just been, we're going to have some time to reflect on how we're feeling. I did one recently in October following the remarks made at the Tory party conference around trans women not being on women-only wards. I held a space virtually for the trans community at Vodafone and invited our senior executive sponsor to join that session. I invited him to just listen and learn, and I said that at the beginning of the call. I said it to him beforehand. I was like, I don't want to like prep you. You're not, no one's going to be asking you questions. You know, you're not expected to speak. And I said that to the audience as well. But it was so powerful because so many people felt able to share and felt like their workplace was acknowledging what was happening outside of the sphere of Vodafone and of the workplace, and how that impacts us in our day-to-day work as well. So I know it's not necessarily one easy little thing to do, it's a big thing, but bringing that awareness of the outside environment into the workplace, I think, is so key to make that place where people are safe.
Brilliant. Do you want to go next, Laura?
Yeah. I think, there's so many things. I think allyship is super important inside and outside of work. I think representing the voices that aren't at the table and naming that and acknowledging that and, looking at the power in the room. But actively creating spaces like staff networks can be so powerful. It's often in times of need or in challenging times, like Ella just touched on with the negative rhetoric, more than negative rhetoric that we've got at the moment in the media. Working at LGBT Foundation, 37% of my colleagues are trans and non-binary, and the impact that, each news story can have, or losing a life from our community in the media can have, really impacts the workforce. So we really, talk about wellbeing a lot. We have a really good counselling service where people can pick their own counsellor as well. But we've got 4 staff networks for people of colour, people with disabilities, for women as well. And the working conversations that come out of them are brilliant. So yeah, my tip or a bit of advice would be, if you haven't got one of those at your workplace, look at how to start one. There's actually a panel about staff networks on today, I believe, as well. And yeah, try and create those spaces for people to come together. When people feel psychologically unsafe, it's been proven that people, say you're at work and you don't want people to know you're queer, right? That if there's someone that's like out and queer at work, you'll maybe actively, subconsciously not want to be aligned with that person. That's been proven and written about. So how can we create spaces where it's safe for those people to come together? Yeah.
Brilliant. Have you got anything to add, Catherine? I know we've gone through a list here.
Well,
so.
I'm a massive advocate of badges. Love a good badge. I think from my perspective, particularly, and I think resonating with some of the things we were talking about, the corporate power as well as the personal needs to be the balance with this. And from my experience where I am now and why I am happy in the environment I'm in is having that kind of corporate backbone that says every time anything happens, they reach out immediately. This is not okay with us. This is what it is. But it's also delivered by an individual who is a person, and it is consistently repeated to remind people. So it's not just something that happens once a year, that goes all bells and whistles. This is something from a personal aspect, a human aspect that says, no, that's not okay, and we will continue to remind you and create the spaces for you to feel yourself and feel kind of accepted. So my ask is to, if I could have it, is just have it constantly, every day. Just remind me of how safe I am, because sometimes I don't feel it, and we won't be able to influence every single interaction. But if you've got that corporate might, if you've got that might behind you and you feel, no, this is the minority, they're the minority, not me, I think that's really super powerful.
Wow. Well, I've got some notes for you, because I was taking in everything that they were saying, and if you want to help people at work become more psychologically safe, then it's about visibility, awareness, allyship in ERGs, support, and I think this is key, consistency. This isn't something that we just want to talk about for a week or for a celebration day. This is something that we want to breed into our culture. This is about how we connect with human beings. This is about how we value each other. And I'll say lastly, and then I'll open the floor. We've got 5 minutes for questions. But everything that we've talked about today and all of the changes that have been suggested, they're not big things, but they mean big things to each individual. So even if you're doing or taking a small step, just be aware that that can make a massive difference to people. So before I open the floor for questions, I just would appreciate your gratitude and give some warmth to my incredible panel. Okay. Okay, so I've been taught by Linda to time things impeccably, so I've now got 8 minutes for questioning. If you have got a question, please put your hand up and somebody will bring a mic to you. Oh, no, we've got one.
Hello. It's a great panel. Really enjoyed it. First of all,
Can you just say your name and your job title?
My name is Linda Riley. My pronouns are she, her. I wanted to have a question on pronouns because I am personally misgendered quite often, especially in the bathroom, toilet, they say in the UK. But I wanted to talk about, you mentioned about, Ella, about the misgendering. How do you feel about it in a way when it's done, and you mentioned it as well, Kit, when it was done maliciously. How do you feel when it's done non-maliciously? And, you know, as an ally, what could I do to support in the workplace as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think it, for me, it varies. I mean, it depends. It does kind of depend what kind of day I'm having and how much it's happened that day. If it's happened like 5 times already that day and then somebody says it, I might get a bit annoyed. I think it depends how well I know the people as well. If it's somebody that I work with all the time and have worked with for years, and they've known me using they, them pronouns for years, and they are still, years later, still making mistakes, that bothers me more than a complete random stranger that doesn't know me, doesn't really know my pronouns, that gets them wrong. I'm like, of course, I'm not bothered by that. But I think it's that, are you actually making an effort? So I think if I see people making an effort, even if they make a mistake, then that's okay, really. So my mum, for example, she's awful with my pronouns, but it's fine because she tries in her own way. We were walking the dogs a while ago, and she tried to introduce me to one of the neighbours that she bumped into, and she keeps trying not to refer to me as her eldest daughter. So she was like, "Oh, this is Ella. Ella's my eldest," and I was like, "Oh, she's nailing this." And then was like, she's come back home for the weekend because she's blah, blah, and then she's going back to London this evening. And then the neighbour walked away, and my mum was like, "I was so close, wasn't I? But then I messed up." I was like, "You were, but I know that you're trying." So like, it is that effort. If I know that people are trying that know me, I really appreciate it. If I know that people aren't really trying, I can kind of see that as well. If I've had limited interaction with people and they make a mistake, it's kind of water off a duck's back, really. It kind of happens quite often, so I'm kind of used to it.
Yeah, I think my boss, when I came out on that day, when I burst into tears, and I told him, he waited till the evening. He said he waited till my email had switched over, which did take the whole day. And with my new name, I went from Kate to Kit. And he sent me this amazing email, and it said, you know, blah, 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 and it said, you know, we'll all try our best. We will get it wrong, because I'd done a year with them, you know, prior to this name change. And he said, but we are trying because we love you and we respect you and you are brave. And but you just have to pull us up on it, you know. Yeah. And so, you know, I came back from travelling many years ago when I was actually about 23 and said to my mum, I want to be called Kit. And she told me to stop being absolutely ridiculous. Because I didn't have the words non-binary at that point. And so becoming Kit, that the first day that I put my name in my email was probably the best day of my life, other than my son being born. It was absolutely incredible. But even still now, people at work get it wrong, and they get it wrong frequently. And I just say, "Oh no, remember it's they, not she." Oh, and they go, yeah, no, I'm sorry. And I think that's all you can do, really, is to be kind and inclusive, because they're trying. I did get very cross last week, actually, and I did snap at a colleague because actually she was quite annoyed that I was in her desk, because we hot desk, and she walked towards me and went, "Oh, she's in my chair." And I didn't do anything, and then she said, "She's in my chair," again. And I said, "I don't think you could be talking about me, because I'm not she, am I?" And I said it probably, and I'm a really chilled person, I said it actually a little gruffly. And all day I felt sick that I'd been gruff toward my colleague. And I went home and I talked to my wife and I said, "I feel like I should apologise." And she said, "No, don't apologise don't apologise for being you. You know, obviously we don't want to shout at somebody because people are just trying. So, yeah, I think there's other times when I just let it go completely. In fact, the charming man giving cups of tea called me Miss 4 times. And I just think that's lovely, he called me Miss. I am 52, and I'm quite old. I'd definitely be a madam or a Mrs., but, you know, but I didn't feel that it was the space where I needed to correct him because he was being totally lovely. So I think it's a personal choice about when you know, do and don't make a thing of it.
I'd also add, I think it's how people respond when you do call them out or when they do realise they've made a mistake. Like, I always say the best thing, just quick, oh, sorry, they, and then just carry on. Don't draw attention to it. One of my previous managers, I had sent this email to a load of my colleagues that I work with that was still repeatedly getting my pronouns wrong after at least a year. My next one-to-one, she cried on a Teams call about how awful she felt that she was getting my pronouns wrong. It was horrible. I felt so uncomfortable. I then ended up reassuring her and being like, it's okay, don't worry about it. Whereas actually, no, you should be worrying about it. I'm on your team, like you should be getting my pronouns right, especially that it's been now like over a year since I first came out. So yeah, I think it's how we react as well when we do make mistakes, because they'll happen. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, we've got 1 minute left.
I think it's really important that training around kind of, misgendering, microaggressions to other protected characteristics, etc., are spoken about as common things and looking at what your calling in culture is. And actually acknowledging that for you to do that quick risk assessment about whether I'm going to correct someone or whether it's an ally that's going to correct someone, we're always risk assessing whether it's safe to do that or not as well, and creating that psychological safety to be able to call someone in and knowing that actually the space will be held, it will be protected. You know, working in a workplace where people have all types of different pronouns, some people change their pronouns at different times. We have a system where if someone changes their pronouns or name, within 24 hours, even the historical name on any IT document isn't there. Their dead name will not be used again. They get a new ID badge, a new email account. Everything is done so smoothly and quickly that that person doesn't feel the weight of it. And I think as an organisation, that's something we can think about and reflect on as well.
Well, we are out of time, but thank you again to the incredible panellists. And I think what we can all take away from this and what we can move on into the day with, this is a safe space. You're all psychologically safe here, so connect with each other. Amplify the most marginalised voices in the room. Learn from each other. Keep sharing your stories with candour and vulnerability. And maybe next year, Lesbian Visitor Week is even bigger. There's even more voices. And we'll be talking less about how we keep safe and more about how we celebrate. Thank you for being here.